The alien fleet had been traveling for months through the silent, dark stretches of space, moving from one distant system to another. Their mission was daring, almost reckless. For generations, alien scholars had warned about a certain region far beyond the known borders, a place simply marked on their maps as human space. No one had ever returned from there. Entire fleets had vanished, some supposedly destroyed, others rumored to have been absorbed into strange gravitational anomalies that swallowed them whole. The stories were terrifying, but curiosity, pride, and the need to claim new territory pushed this latest team forward. The commander of the fleet was not young, and not reckless either. He had seen the galaxy's wonders and horrors, and he had fought in skirmishes where entire civilizations disappeared in days. Still, even he could not resist the lure of this mystery. "We know the risks," he told his crew, his voice steady but firm, "but we have the technology. We have the sensors. And we have the intelligence. This time we will return, and we will bring back knowledge no one else dared to seek." The crew consisted of experts in navigation, engineering, communications, and science. Each member had their own reason for being here. Some were driven by curiosity, others by the chance to make history. A few admitted in private that fear had always been part of their motivation. After all, who could resist exploring the place that swallowed the bravest fleets alive? As they approached the border of human space, the tension was almost palpable. The scanners began to behave strangely, readings flickering in ways that made no sense. Gravitational measurements shifted suddenly. Energy spikes appeared where none should exist, and communications experienced brief but unnerving delays. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "This is just interference," the commander said aloud, trying to convince both himself and them. "Nothing we can't handle." But as they crossed deeper into the unknown, the anomalies intensified. The instruments that had always been reliable now seemed to have a mind of their own. Navigation grids warped subtly, as if the very space around them had a strange living quality. Some of the crew whispered that it felt as if someone or something was watching them. Hours passed, and the alien fleet had moved farther than anyone had dared before. Still, no signs of human ships appeared. No warnings, no signals, no attacks. The absence of anything felt heavier than the threat of weapons or cosmic storms. The silence was strange and unnerving, and every crew member felt it in their bones. Yet, the team pushed on, fueled by determination and the pressure of their mission. They wanted to be the first in a century to step into this forbidden zone and return alive. The map showed nothing but a vast expanse of empty stars. But the sensors now detected something curious patterns in the energy fluctuations that didn't match anything they had encountered in the galaxy before. Lines and grids, almost like invisible fences, seemed to crisscross the space around them. One of the scientists finally spoke up. "These readings, they're not natural," they said quietly. "Whatever is here, it isn't like anything we've studied. It's deliberate. Someone or something is controlling it." The commander's expression hardened. He had expected danger, of course, but this was different. It was subtle, intelligent, calculated. The idea that they had crossed into a monitored region had not fully occurred to him until this moment. Despite the unease, they moved forward, and the fleet entered a zone where the stars themselves seemed dimmer, as if some invisible filter muted the light. The energy spikes became more frequent, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat hidden in the void. The crew could not see it, could not understand it, but the feeling of being observed grew stronger. It was no longer just instruments, it was instinct. Late into the alien night cycle, a junior officer reported a brief signal, a human-like signature, but unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered. The signal was weak and fragmented, barely enough to decode. Still, it was unmistakable. Someone or something was here, and they knew the aliens had arrived. The commander ordered the fleet to hold formation. He considered turning back, but the thought of retreating now felt like failure. They had come too far, invested too much. "We are explorers," he reminded them. Explorers are not defined by fear. They are defined by discovery. They advanced cautiously, scanning for any hint of the source. For hours, nothing appeared. Then, suddenly, one of the vessels detected a faint movement, a shadow on the edge of their sensors. It was not a ship in the traditional sense. It moved unnaturally, almost like a shape that bent space itself. Alarm spread through the crew. "Unknown entity detected," the alert announced. "Approaching speed is indeterminate. Movement patterns are not human." The aliens were not prepared for what came next. Their communications devices, which had been stable for months, now glitched, repeating fragments of messages that seemed strangely calm and precise. It was as if a presence was testing their responses. Every time they tried to contact each other, their voices returned slightly altered, almost echoing in a way that suggested the emptiness of the void itself was listening. Panic, though controlled, began to seep in. The junior officer, who had first detected the signal, was shaking slightly. "Commander, I don't think we should have come this far," they said. "There's something here, and it's not just waiting. It's aware." The commander's jaw tightened. He had suspected danger, but not intelligence this subtle. For a moment, he considered retreating, but he knew the consequences. Leaving now would be like admitting they had failed before understanding the truth. Instead, he made a decision that would change everything. Maintain formation. Keep scanning, but be ready for anything. We have crossed the threshold, and we will not falter now. As the alien fleet moved deeper, the sense of being watched grew almost unbearable. Eyes that no one could see seemed to follow them. Every vibration, every pulse in their instruments, was another reminder that they were intruding where no one had ever been welcomed. And yet, curiosity, courage, and the human-like desire to prove themselves pushed them onward. They had entered human space, unaware that they were about to learn a truth far stranger than any story or legend. A truth that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. For now, however, the aliens did not know what waited. They only knew that the empty, silent expanse of space around them was alive with something they could not yet comprehend. And that knowledge, even in its absence, was enough to make their hearts race. The journey had just begun, and they had already learned one undeniable fact. Some borders were not meant to be crossed lightly. Some spaces were not empty, and some stories of disappearance were far more complex than simple fear or failure. The aliens pressed on, unaware that every step they took was being observed, every calculation anticipated, and every move recorded by a civilization that had learned long ago how to protect itself and its secrets. They had jumped into human space, confident in their technology, their courage, and their experience, but they had yet to understand why no one ever returned. And the moment of discovery, when it came, would be unlike anything they had ever imagined. The alien fleet had barely crossed deeper into human space when the first real signs of something unknown began to appear. At first, there were subtle tiny fluctuations in energy readings, minor distortions in space that could have been dismissed as cosmic anomalies. But the longer they moved forward, the stranger and more deliberate these signs became. It started with the gravity measurements. Normally, the crew could predict how gravity would behave in a given region, even in deep space. But now, the instruments began to flicker, showing weak gravitational pulls that changed direction suddenly and without warning. One moment, the readings were perfectly normal, and the next, a slight pull tugged the fleet sideways, as if invisible hands were guiding them. The engineers worked tirelessly, checking and rechecking systems, but everything appeared in perfect working order. There was no malfunction, The anomaly was real, but its cause remained invisible. "Commander," one of the scientists said, pointing at a holographic display, "these fluctuations, they're almost patterned. Look at the way they pulse. It's not random. Someone designed this." The commander frowned, leaning closer. "Designed? Are you suggesting that humans, if they're even responsible, have created artificial gravity manipulation?" The scientists shook their head. "I don't know. But it's definitely deliberate. And it's everywhere. This region? It isn't just empty space. It's controlled space." The crew felt a ripple of unease. None of them had ever encountered anything like this before. In other sectors of the galaxy, anomalies existed, of course, but they were usually natural. Black holes, pulsars, energy storms. But this felt like someone had arranged the cosmos itself, like a trap. A maze with invisible walls. Then came the energy spikes. At first, the sensors detected tiny pulses, brief blips that lasted only milliseconds. But they quickly became stronger, almost like silent warnings. The pulses did not match any known energy source. They did not resemble weapon signatures, but they had an intensity that made the crew's instruments tremble. Some engineers joked nervously that the fleet's scanners were scared. But deep down, everyone knew this was serious. A young officer, monitoring the readings, spoke up. "Sir, it's like space itself is alive. Every time we move, these spikes react. It's as if something or someone is following us." The commander did not respond immediately. He looked out at the darkness beyond the fleet, at the countless stars dimly shining in the distance, and tried to imagine what could be doing this. He had faced enemies before, civilizations more brutal than any story could describe. But this was something different. This was intelligence hidden in plain space, invisible yet undeniably present. As hours passed, the alien fleet realized they were not alone. Small, subtle distortions appeared around them, almost like shadows bending in ways that defied physics. The crew could not see anything directly, but every instrument hinted at movement, something weaving through the void. Tracking their position, one of the communications officers tried to send a signal back to the home system. It was a simple message, a status report, a request for guidance. But the transmission never left human space. Instead, it returned almost immediately, scrambled and slightly delayed, carrying a strange echo. Words repeated themselves. Sounds shifted. The crew listened in disbelief. The voice of the signal, distorted as it was, had a calm, deliberate tone, almost human-like. "This is impossible," the officer muttered. "Nothing can intercept and return signals this quickly at this distance. Unless they're here." The commander finally spoke. "We assumed there would be warnings, perhaps defense systems. But we didn't expect them to be intelligent, to respond. That changes everything." Tension filled the fleet. Every crew member felt the sense of being watched. Even those who had trained in the galaxy's most dangerous zones admitted they had never experienced this. It was not fear of combat, not fear of failure. It was a deeper, more instinctive unease, the kind that gnawed at your chest and made your mind race. Then, one of the sensors picked up faint but unmistakable movement. At first, it was just a shadow on the edge of detection, barely there. But it moved deliberately, almost as if it were studying the fleet. Every time the aliens shifted formation, the shadow adjusted, keeping a perfect distance. It wasn't attacking, but it wasn't ignoring them either. It simply existed, watching. "Commander," said another officer, voice tight with tension, "we're being observed. I don't know by what, but it's intelligent. It's tracking us." The commander's jaw tightened. "We have no choice. We continue forward. Keep sensors active. Be ready for anything." Hours turned into what felt like days. though the crew measured time in cycles of artificial light and monitored readings. Every anomaly, every spike, every shift in gravity reinforced the same message. They were not welcome here. And yet, there was no hostility in the traditional sense. No attacks, no explosions, no signs of immediate danger. Only awareness, deliberate and silent. The scientists began analyzing patterns. They noticed something even stranger. The energy spikes, the gravitational shifts, and the distortions were coordinated. They seemed almost communicative. Not words, not symbols, but a language of movement and pulses. A silent dialogue that the fleet was only beginning to understand. This isn't a trap, one scientist said quietly. At least, not yet. It's more like we're being observed, like students being watched by a teacher. Someone is learning from us, studying our reactions. The commander frowned. If that's true, then whoever is here is extremely patient. They can observe without interacting directly. And they have been doing it for a long time, probably for centuries. A sense of awe and dread filled the crew. This was no ordinary civilization. Whoever controlled this space had the intelligence, technology, and discipline to manage entire fleets without revealing themselves. And unlike any other species they had encountered, these beings did not react with immediate violence or defense. Their presence alone was enough to unsettle the most confident explorers in the galaxy. Late in the alien night cycle, the fleet's youngest officer, monitoring the sensors, detected something remarkable. A signal, fragmented but undeniably artificial, appeared faintly on the scanners. It was not an attack. It was a message, a test, perhaps. The transmission carried patterns that suggested careful analysis, almost like someone was gauging the fleet's behavior. The commander leaned over the display, eyes narrowing. Open a channel, carefully, and try to respond. But do not reveal everything about our mission. The communications officer hesitated. Sir, it's strange. The signal isn't like anything we've intercepted before. It's precise, calm, almost human-like. But the syntax, the timing, it's unlike any language in our database. Then we proceed carefully, the commander said. We observe, we respond, but we remain cautious. Keep shields ready, engines on standby, and sensors active. We cannot afford mistakes. As the fleet advanced, the crew began to realize the truth. Human space was not uninhabited. It was controlled. And it was controlled by a civilization that did not rely on brute force or traditional defense systems. Instead, they had created an environment where intrusion itself was impossible to ignore. Space itself became a tool, a message, a warning. Every member of the fleet felt a mix of fear, excitement, and fascination. They had crossed into uncharted territory, the same territory that had swallowed fleets whole. But unlike the lost expeditions of legend, they were not being attacked. They were being studied. And the implications of that realization were staggering. It was the kind of understanding that changed perspective. The galaxy's tales of humans as reckless, chaotic, or brutal seemed inadequate. Whatever lay ahead, it would be unlike anything the aliens had imagined. They were no longer just explorers. They were participants in a silent, deliberate examination by a civilization that had learned to protect itself in ways the galaxy would never have predicted. And so, the fleet moved forward, deeper into the unknown. Every spike in energy, every shift in gravity, every echo of the strange signals reminded them that this space was not empty. It was alive with intelligence, patience, and quiet power. The crew knew, even if they could not fully articulate it yet, that they had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. They were in human space, observed, tested, and measured. And the lessons of the past fleets that had vanished would soon become clear to them. For now, though All they could do was move carefully, study the signals, and hope that their courage and curiosity would be enough to see them through the next stage of the journey, a stage that would change their understanding of the galaxy forever. The alien fleet had been moving cautiously for what felt like days, though time in deep space was measured differently than on planetary worlds. Every crew member felt the growing tension. They had noticed patterns, observed strange energy pulses, and felt the invisible watchfulness that surrounded them. But now, something new was about to happen, something none of them had anticipated. It started with the shadows. At first, they were small, almost imperceptible distortions at the edge of the fleet's sensors. But soon, they became more defined, more deliberate, and almost perfectly synchronized with the fleet's movements. The crew began to realize these were not natural phenomena. They were intelligent, controlled, and responsive. The youngest officer in the fleet, responsible for sensor analysis, spoke quietly, almost to themselves. It's not just space reacting. It's someone. Someone is out there, watching every move we make. The commander nodded. I know. And soon we will see them. Minutes later, the first human vessels appeared, not in the form the aliens expected. They did not look like typical warships, nor like the huge, heavily armed exploration vessels of other species. These ships were sleek, almost organic in appearance, with surfaces that shimmered and changed subtly in the dim light of distant stars. They moved gracefully, silently, and without warning. The alien crew froze, staring at the display. What are they? Whispered one of the scientists. They are not attacking, the commander said carefully. But they are observing and judging. A calm voice suddenly filled their communication system. It was smooth, measured, and in perfect universal translation. You have entered restricted territory, the voice said. Identify yourselves and state your purpose. The alien fleet was stunned. No one had expected communication. They had anticipated defense systems, automated attacks, or perhaps traps. But a voice clear, human, and composed was something entirely different. The communications officer responded, hands trembling slightly. We are explorers from the Coalition of Outer Systems. We seek knowledge and safe passage. We did not intend to provoke conflict. There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again, calm and firm. You are observed. Your intent is noted. Further movement requires full identification and compliance with human space regulations. The commander exhaled slowly. He realized the stories he had heard, the warnings and legends, had painted humanity as chaotic, violent, or unpredictable. But this was different. There was no hostility, only authority and precision. There was control, yes, but it was measured. Restrained. The human vessels shifted slightly, forming a formation around the alien fleet. They did not attack, but the display showed a clear understanding of the fleet's movements. Every maneuver, every course correction, was mirrored, anticipated, or countered in a way that left no room for error. The aliens could feel the silent power of the humans, a power they had only imagined in legends, but never truly understood. The lead human vessel transmitted again. You have crossed a boundary that has remained closed for centuries. Previous intrusions were handled discreetly to prevent unnecessary conflict. You now have the opportunity to demonstrate peaceful intent. Failure to comply will result in containment. Containment. The word hung in the air, heavier than any threat the aliens had ever received. It was not a warning of destruction, but a promise of control. They were being reminded that humans did not rely on brute force to maintain dominance. They relied on discipline, intelligence, and restraint. The alien commander, after a tense moment, gave the order to comply. Identification codes, fleet registry numbers, and mission objectives were transmitted carefully, fully aware that any misstep could provoke a reaction. The humans listened, analyzed, and responded in kind, confirming receipt and providing guidance on the next steps. As the alien fleet continued under human observation, they began to notice other subtle details. Human sensors were everywhere, integrated into the fabric of space itself. Not satellites, not probes, but discrete points of monitoring that were almost invisible. The humans did not rely on overwhelming firepower or intimidation. They had created a network, a quiet, patient, and perfect system of awareness. A young engineer whispered to a colleague, "It's like the space itself belongs to them. They can see everything, know everything, and yet they don't attack. They just watch." The commander nodded silently. He was beginning to understand. The stories of fleets vanishing, of explorers never returning, these were not tales of human aggression. They were tales of human caution. Every disappearance, every lost expedition, had been the result of humans intervening quietly, decisively, and without unnecessary destruction. The aliens had misread the intentions of a civilization that valued life and control above all else. Hours passed, and the human vessels continued to escort the fleet, maintaining a careful distance while ensuring no sudden moves went unnoticed. It was a strange feeling for the alien crew, both reassuring and unnerving. They were not under attack, but every action was observed and measured. There was no room for error, and the responsibility weighed heavily on the commander and his officers. Finally, the humans transmitted again, their tone calm but firm. "You may proceed temporarily under supervision. You are allowed to navigate within these limits, but any attempt to bypass regulations will result in immediate containment and review." The commander allowed a small sigh of relief. They were not under direct threat, not yet. They had survived the first encounter, and yet the encounter had changed everything. The galaxy's stories about humanity were incomplete, misleading, and perhaps intentionally so. Humans were not violent brutes. They were disciplined, controlled, and far more advanced than anyone had suspected. The scientists began to study the humans' methods, trying to understand the technology and strategy behind the observation. There was no sign of aggression, no weapons deployed, yet the humans had full control. Their ability to monitor and influence space without direct confrontation was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. It was both terrifying and impressive. The commander gathered the senior staff. "Listen carefully," he said. "We have learned more in the past few hours than we have in months of exploration. Humans are not what we were told. They are not reckless. They are not violent without reason. They are precise, patient, and intelligent beyond measure. Our goal now is to survive, to observe, and to learn. We move forward, but we do so with caution and respect." The crew nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Every decision, every maneuver, every action would now carry the weight of human scrutiny. They were guests in a space that was not theirs, under observation by a civilization that had every advantage and no need for unnecessary conflict. And yet, there was a strange sense of awe among the crew. They had entered the unknown and encountered a species unlike any other. The humans had not attacked, had not destroyed, had not driven them away. Instead, they had revealed a new form of power, one built on control, patience, and intelligence. The alien fleet moved forward under supervision, each member aware that this was only the beginning. They had crossed into human space, made first contact, and survived. But the lessons were just starting. The reality of humanity, its discipline, its methods, and its silent strength would soon challenge everything the aliens believed about the galaxy. For the first time, the crew understood that the legends of humans being dangerous were only partially true. Humans were dangerous, yes, but not because they were violent or reckless. They were dangerous because they had learned to control situations in ways no other species had ever mastered. They had patience, foresight, and a willingness to act only when necessary, making them unpredictable, respected, and formidable. And so the fleet continued, moving carefully under human observation, aware that their every action was being watched and recorded. The journey that had begun with curiosity and pride now carried a deeper understanding. Human space was not empty. It was alive with intelligence, protection, and control. And humanity, for all its calm, quiet authority, was a force the galaxy had never fully understood until now. The encounter had not ended with conflict, but with revelation. The alien crew realized that their assumptions about humans were flawed, their stories incomplete, and their understanding of this species entirely superficial. They were witnessing a civilization that had mastered the art of observation, influence, and restraint skills that no fleet of explorers or armies could easily match. And as they moved deeper into the monitored space, the crew could not help but feel a mix of fear, respect, and awe. They were guests in a realm that was not theirs, navigating rules they had barely begun to understand, and learning lessons that would change their perception of the galaxy forever. This was the moment the aliens realized the truth. Humanity did not need to destroy to dominate. Humanity's strength was subtle, intelligent, and disciplined, and that was far more powerful than any weapon they had ever seen. The alien fleet had been moving carefully under human supervision for some time, and the tension aboard their ships was high. Every crew member knew that they were in a place no one had ever returned from, and yet, surprisingly, the humans had not attacked. They had observed, guided, and tested, but not harmed. Now, the alien crew was about to learn the truth behind the centuries-old stories, why every expedition before them had vanished without a trace. It began slowly. The lead human vessel transmitted a calm, deliberate message. You have questions. That is expected. You seek to understand why no fleet has ever returned. Listen carefully. The stories you have been told are incomplete. You are about to learn the truth. The aliens, relieved yet nervous, responded in kind, asking for clarification. The human ship continued. In the past, explorers entered this space uninvited. They brought weapons. They acted with arrogance, assuming the space was unclaimed and unprotected. Our predecessors, your predecessors, were aggressive. They invaded. They stole. They tried to control what did not belong to them. Every intrusion was handled quietly, decisively, and with precision. No unnecessary destruction was required. But the intruders themselves disappeared, relocated, and observed for study. The alien crew was stunned. Relocated? The commander repeated, disbelief clear in his voice. You did not destroy them? The human vessel transmitted again, the calm voice echoing in the fleet's communication systems. No, they were never destroyed. You misunderstand the tales you have been told. The legends were shaped by fear and rumor. We did not annihilate those who entered. We prevented them from interfering. They were contained, studied, and released only when it was safe and appropriate. The galaxy assumed destruction because no one ever returned to tell the truth. A murmur ran through the alien crew. Some officers looked at each other, trying to grasp the concept. They had been trained to assume the worst, to prepare for violence, to expect attack. Yet here was a civilization that exercised extraordinary restraint, a species capable of defending itself without unnecessary bloodshed. The commander, still trying to understand, asked, why keep such a secret? Why allow the galaxy to believe you destroyed them? The human vessel responded, calm and patient. For centuries, it was necessary. The galaxy does not always respect boundaries. Knowledge is dangerous when paired with arrogance. The stories you heard were intended to protect us and prevent further intrusion. The reality, our methods of observation, containment, and diplomacy would not have been understood or respected. Fear ensured safety. Misunderstanding ensured survival. The alien crew began to realize the magnitude of what they were hearing. Every fleet that had disappeared, every lost mission that had terrified civilizations across the stars, had been carefully managed by humans. They had been alive, removed from danger, and observed, but the galaxy never knew it. The truth had been hidden to protect humanity, and perhaps to teach the universe a lesson in humility. The lead human vessel continued, "You are the first in generations to enter this space with neither malice nor arrogance. Your curiosity is noted. You have complied with guidance, and you have shown restraint. That is why we now reveal this history. You may continue under supervision, but you must understand, every past fleet vanished because of its own recklessness, not because of aggression from humans." A scientist aboard one of the alien ships whispered to a colleague, "So all those fleets we thought were destroyed, they were alive the whole time?" The colleague nodded slowly, eyes wide. "Relocated, observed, maybe even learning. They were never attacked, never destroyed. Humans just controlled the situation perfectly." The commander absorbed this in silence. He thought of the countless legends, the fearful reports, the warnings from scholars across the galaxy. Every tale had been wrong, not out of deception for cruelty, but out of necessity for survival. Humans did not need to destroy. They needed control. They needed order. And they had achieved it in a way no one else could imagine. Hours passed as the humans continued to communicate, explaining the history in careful detail. Each story reinforced the same lesson. Humanity had faced countless intrusions, invasions, and attempts to manipulate their space. Each time, they acted with patience, intelligence, and precision. Every fleet that vanished had been contained, studied, and only occasionally returned under strict conditions. Their civilization did not act recklessly. It acted deliberately, and every decision had long-term strategy behind it. The alien crew was awed. They had imagined humans as aggressive, perhaps even chaotic. They had expected attacks, traps, or direct conflict. Instead, they were learning about a civilization that valued restraint, discipline, and intelligence above all else. Humanity's power was not in overwhelming force. It was in foresight, planning, and understanding the universe in ways few species could comprehend. The commander finally spoke to his crew. "Listen carefully. We have entered a space unlike any other. Humanity's methods are beyond anything we have trained for. They do not need weapons to dominate. They control, observe, and influence without violence. And every story of destruction you've heard is wrong. Every lost fleet vanished because of its own mistakes, not because of attack." One officer asked, "Then why tell us now? Why reveal this?" The human vessel's response was calm, almost philosophical. "Because you are different. You have acted with respect and restraint. You are not here to conquer or steal. You are here to observe. You may not fully understand yet, but your actions prove that some in the galaxy are capable of learning from the past. That is why the truth can now be shared." The alien crew felt a mixture of relief, awe, and confusion. They had entered a place shrouded in fear and legend, expecting danger at every turn. Yet they found understanding, patience, and intelligence. Humans had not destroyed fleets, they had educated them, or at least contained them until education was possible. The story continued. The human vessel detailed how previous fleets were carefully monitored, how their activities were recorded, how every decision was logged, and how lessons were taught indirectly. The aliens realized that many of the legends about human ruthlessness had been based on partial information, miscommunication, and fear. The reality was far more remarkable. A young scientist said softly, "They didn't need to fight. They just watched, learned, and acted only when necessary. And it worked. No one could resist them without understanding the consequences. The commander nodded. "That is true power," he said. "Not destruction, not fear. Control, discipline, and patience. Humans have mastered it, and we are witnessing it firsthand." The humans continued to guide the alien fleet, offering subtle assistance, maintaining observation, and allowing them to explore cautiously. Every step of the way, the aliens could sense the intelligence behind the calm authority. This was not arrogance. It was mastery. And it was deliberate. The lesson became clear to every crew member. Human space had not been closed to punish outsiders. It had been protected to preserve the galaxy's balance, to prevent mistakes, to avoid unnecessary conflict. Humans had chosen restraint over recklessness, foresight over aggression, and strategy over brute force. Every fleet that had disappeared was evidence not of human destruction, but of human wisdom, that by the time the alien fleet had processed this revelation, their perspective of humanity had shifted entirely. What they had feared as a violent, dangerous species was actually a civilization of remarkable intelligence, capable of controlling entire regions of space without the need for traditional warfare. Humanity's strength lay in its patience, discipline, and understanding of consequences. For the first time, the aliens realized why no one had ever returned, not because humans were killers, but because humans were careful. Every fleet had been managed with precision, every intruder studied, every mistake noted. And now, this new fleet, this group of explorers, had been allowed to enter because they had proven themselves capable of understanding the rules, capable of respecting boundaries, and capable of learning. The commander finally spoke to his crew, his voice calm but filled with awe. "We have crossed into human space and learned the truth. Humanity does not destroy for power. Humanity controls for survival, for balance, and for understanding. Every lost fleet was a lesson, not a tragedy. And now we are being given the chance to learn from them." The crew felt a mixture of relief, wonder, and deep respect. They had expected danger and violence, but instead, they found wisdom, patience, and intelligence. Humans had not merely protected their space, they had taught the galaxy a lesson about restraint, understanding, and control. As the fleet continued under human observation, the crew knew that their journey had only begun. They had crossed into forbidden space, learned why no one had ever returned, and begun to understand the extraordinary power of a civilization that did not rely on force, but on strategy, discipline, and foresight. And in that moment, every member of the alien crew realized the truth. Humanity was not what the galaxy believed it to be. Humans were not reckless, violent, or chaotic. They were precise, controlled, and extraordinary. And that realization would change everything they thought they knew about the universe. The alien fleet had been moving cautiously under human observation for some time now. Every crew member had begun to understand that this civilization was unlike any other in the galaxy. They had observed, guided, and revealed truths that no one had ever been allowed to know before. And now, the humans presented the aliens with a choice one that would test their judgment, their courage, and their understanding of everything they had experienced so far. A calm transmission reached the alien commander from the lead human vessel. "You have shown restraint, cooperation, and curiosity. You have complied with our guidance, and you have proven that you are not here to conquer or steal. For that, you are granted a choice. You may return to your home systems with a message for your people, or you may remain temporarily under observation and guidance for a full debriefing of human space protocols. The choice is yours." The commander paused. He understood the gravity of the decision. Returning home would be safe, respected, and historic. They would bring back the story of having survived human space, of having encountered the legendary. civilization that had been shrouded in mystery for centuries. But staying would be risky. They would be in an unknown region, fully under observation, learning lessons that no fleet had been given in generations. He called his senior officers for a private discussion. The atmosphere in the meeting room was tense. Each officer understood the risks involved. The fleet had already been tested, observed, and guided carefully. But now, the choice was theirs. If we return now, one officer said, we leave with knowledge that will astound our civilization. But we leave much behind. We will never know the full extent of their methods, their control, or their wisdom. Another officer added, staying carries risk. We don't know what else they might test, what scenarios they may create. But the opportunity to learn truly understand their technology, their philosophy, their methods is priceless. It could change the way our civilization operates forever. The commander listened carefully. He had faced difficult choices before, but this was unlike any other. The decision was not about survival alone. It was about curiosity, wisdom, and the courage to confront the unknown. Finally, he spoke. We came here to explore, to learn, and to challenge ourselves. We have crossed into territory no one else dared. We have survived the first encounters, and we have witnessed the strength of a civilization unlike any other. We will stay. We will accept their guidance and learn as much as we can. This is an opportunity we cannot ignore. The decision was made, and the transmission to the human vessel was sent. The aliens expressed their willingness to remain under observation, to comply with human protocols, and to learn from this extraordinary civilization. The response came almost immediately. Acknowledged. You will be escorted to a temporary safe zone. You will receive guidance and instruction on our protocols, our boundaries, and our methods. Cooperation and observation will be expected at all times. The alien crew felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had chosen the path of curiosity and learning over safety. They were about to witness the full extent of human control, intelligence, and discipline, and every member of the fleet knew that this experience would change them forever. As they moved toward the designated area, the humans maintained their calm, silent observation. The alien fleet began to notice details they had missed before. Subtle gravitational currents, invisible energy barriers, and monitoring points integrated into space itself. Humans had not needed massive fleets to dominate this region. They had created an environment where control was absolute, where intrusion was impossible without detection, and where knowledge was the ultimate form of power. The aliens were led to a zone that had been prepared for their observation. It was safe, controlled, and perfectly calibrated for study. They could move freely within certain limits, but every action, every maneuver, every experiment they conducted was being monitored carefully. The humans did not interfere unnecessarily. They allowed the aliens to act, to make choices, to explore. But every step was watched, and every lesson was recorded over the next several cycles. The aliens began to learn the depth of human understanding. They observed how humans had managed their own history, their conflicts, and their expansion. They learned that every decision had been made with foresight, with consideration for consequences, and with a long-term vision that few species could comprehend. One of the alien scientists spoke quietly during a briefing. They don't just control space. They control information, decisions, even perception. Everything is deliberate. Every fleet that disappeared, every story we have ever heard about them. It was part of a larger plan to protect themselves and teach lessons indirectly. Another officer added, and they don't need weapons. Their discipline, intelligence, and patience are enough to influence outcomes without direct aggression. That is power in its purest form. The commander nodded, silently impressed. He had expected humans to be strong, clever, and disciplined, but this level of strategy, patience, and foresight was beyond anything he had imagined. Every maneuver, every system, every subtle control mechanism demonstrated mastery over space itself, over behavior, and over understanding. Days turned into cycles, and the alien fleet continued under human guidance. They were allowed to explore certain areas, to conduct experiments, and to test hypotheses, all under observation. Each time, they learned more about the subtlety and intelligence behind human control. They saw how humans had preserved life, avoided unnecessary conflict, and ensured survival without resorting to violence, unless absolutely required. One of the alien engineers whispered to a colleague, "It's like they see the universe differently. They don't act impulsively. They calculate, they predict, and they guide outcomes without forcing them. Every decision is deliberate, but it feels effortless." The commander spoke to his crew during a strategy session. "This is the moment we have waited for. We came to explore, to learn, and to understand. Humans are not just powerful, they are wise. And the lessons we take from here will shape our civilization for generations." The humans continued to provide subtle guidance. They showed the aliens how to navigate gravitational currents, how to interpret energy patterns, and how to detect anomalies that could threaten even the most advanced fleet. They did not interfere unless necessary, but their presence was a constant reminder of control, awareness, and intelligence. The aliens also began to understand why humans had allowed some fleets to vanish in the past. Every fleet that disappeared had acted recklessly, with arrogance or fear. Humans had not destroyed them, they had contained them, taught them lessons indirectly, and ensured that future intrusions would be met with understanding rather than destruction. The commander realized the implications. We have entered a space where force is unnecessary, where observation, patience, and intelligence are the true weapons. We have seen fleets disappear, not because of violence, but because of misunderstanding. Humans protect themselves and their space through knowledge, strategy, and discipline. That is their greatest strength. As cycles passed, the aliens began to trust their hosts. They learned to interpret signals, to follow protocols, and to act within the carefully constructed boundaries. Every movement, every choice, every experiment was a chance to understand a civilization that had been shrouded in myth, fear, and misunderstanding for centuries. The human vessels, ever calm and deliberate, continued to monitor and guide. Their presence was a constant reminder that power was not measured by firepower alone. It was measured by control, foresight, and understanding. The aliens realized that humans had mastered the art of influence without aggression, and that every lesson learned here would be invaluable to their civilization. Finally, the commander addressed his fleet. "We have chosen the path of learning. We have accepted guidance and observation. We are witnessing the extraordinary intelligence, patience, and discipline of humans firsthand. Remember this, because when we return to our systems, we must convey not only what we have seen, but what we have learned, that power does not always require violence, and that knowledge is the ultimate weapon." The fleet moved cautiously through human space, guided and observed, but now with understanding. They had faced the choice of safety or learning, and they had chosen the latter. Every crew member felt a sense of awe, responsibility, and anticipation. They were experiencing something no other fleet had, something that would change their perception of the galaxy forever. For the first time, they realized that humans had not only protected their space, they had taught lessons in patience, observation, and intelligence. They had shown that the greatest strength lay not in aggression, but in understanding, foresight, and control. And in that understanding, the alien fleet found a new purpose: to learn, to absorb, and to carry these lessons back to their civilization, ensuring that the knowledge gained in human space would not be lost, but applied, respected, and honored for generations to come. The alien fleet had spent long cycles under human observation, learning lessons that no other explorers had ever been allowed to experience. They had seen restraint, intelligence, and control at a level that surpassed everything they had known about the galaxy. Now, the time had come to return home, carrying not just their survival, but the knowledge and understanding of a civilization unlike any they had encountered before. The commander called his crew together for a briefing. "We have learned more than we could have imagined. Humans are not what we believed. They are not reckless nor violent without cause. They are disciplined, intelligent, and patient. They protect their space, not through destruction, but through awareness, observation, and strategy. Our mission now is to return home and share what we have learned, so that the galaxy understands the truth about human space." The crew listened attentively, each member reflecting on the journey they had taken. Months of travel, fear, and uncertainty had led them here. They had entered a space shrouded in legend, faced the unknown, and emerged with insights that would change their civilization forever. The fear and tension they had carried at the edge of the unknown were now replaced with awe and understanding. Before leaving, the human vessels transmitted a final message. "You have learned what was necessary. You have shown respect, restraint, and curiosity. Carry this knowledge with care, for it is rare and powerful. Humanity observes, learns, and protects. We trust you to convey the truth and to act wisely in the galaxy. Your return will be noted and monitored until your people have assimilated these lessons." The alien fleet acknowledged the message, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and relief. For the first time in generations, a fleet was allowed to return without fear of destruction, without the anxiety of being lost forever. They had been guided, educated, and allowed to leave with understanding rather than fear. As the fleet began its journey back to familiar space, the crew could not stop reflecting on what they had witnessed. Every member had felt the invisible hand of human oversight, the quiet intelligence behind every movement and decision. They had seen a civilization that valued knowledge over aggression, foresight over impulsivity, and discipline over chaos. The legends of human ferocity, it turned out, had been misinterpretations of wisdom, disguised as mystery. The journey back was different from the journey in. Before, there had been fear, uncertainty, and anticipation. Now, there was reflection, understanding, and a sense of purpose. Each crew member took the time to record observations, analyze data, and write detailed reports that would explain not just the facts of human space, but the philosophy and methods that made humans so formidable. The engineers, once tense over every minor anomaly, now found fascination in the subtle manipulations of space they had observed. "It's incredible," one engineer said quietly. "They didn't need weapons to control us. They used space itself, information, and foresight. That is power I have never seen before." The scientists marveled at the patterns they had recorded. Energy fluctuations, gravitational manipulations, invisible monitoring networks, all had been used in ways that were subtle, intelligent, and humane. "It's like the universe itself is their tool," one scientist said. Every fleet that disappeared was handled with precision, without unnecessary loss. "We were lucky to witness the truth." The commander, watching the crew work, felt a deep sense of pride. They had faced fear and the unknown, and had returned with understanding rather than catastrophe. He spoke to the fleet over the communication systems. "Remember this journey. Remember what we have seen, learned, and experienced. Humans are not just another species. They are an example of patience, strategy, and intelligence. When we return, we must convey these lessons clearly. Our civilization must understand that power does not always require force, and that knowledge is the greatest weapon." As the fleet approached familiar territory, messages from home began to arrive. Other species and coalitions had long feared human space, reporting stories of fleets vanishing, explorers lost, and ships destroyed. The aliens now knew the truth, that these reports were only partially correct, shaped by fear, legend, and misunderstanding. Humanity had never destroyed fleets recklessly. They had managed, contained, and educated in ways that were subtle and precise. The aliens shared their experiences in detail, recounting how they had been observed, guided, and taught without harm. They described the patience, intelligence, and discipline of humans, and how these qualities had allowed them to control space itself without needing to engage in battle. They told of the invisible monitoring points, the manipulation of energy fields, and the careful management of fleets entering human space. Word spread quickly through their civilization. Scholars, leaders, and explorers listened in awe as the story unfolded. The fear and mystery surrounding human space began to fade, replaced by respect, understanding, and admiration. Humans were no longer seen as dangerous and unpredictable. They were a civilization to be studied, learned from, and respected. The commander continued to emphasize the lessons learned. We must remember that power is not measured by weapons or fleets. It is measured by intelligence, patience, and foresight. Humans have shown us that understanding, observation, and restraint are more powerful than aggression. That is the true lesson of human space. The fleet's return was met with celebration, but also reflection. The crew shared their experiences not just as explorers, but as witnesses to something extraordinary. They had entered forbidden space, faced the unknown, and returned with wisdom that would shape their civilization for generations. The scientists worked tirelessly to record every detail, every observation, every anomaly they had witnessed. The engineers analyzed the energy patterns and spatial manipulations, trying to understand how humans could control space without direct interference. Every report, every record, every account was filled with awe and respect for the discipline and intelligence of humanity. As the weeks passed, the impact of their journey became clear. The galaxy's perception of humans shifted. Where there had been fear, there was now understanding. Where there had been speculation, there was now evidence. Humans were no longer just a mysterious, powerful species. They were a civilization that had mastered control, intelligence, and patience in ways no one else had ever imagined. The commander gathered his crew one final time. We entered human space expecting danger. We expected hostility, conflict, perhaps even death. Instead, we found intelligence, patience, and restraint. We have returned not just with survival, but with understanding. That is the greatest achievement of our journey. Let us carry these lessons forward, ensuring that our civilization respects, learns from, and remembers the wisdom we have witnessed. The fleet dispersed across the galaxy, sharing their experiences, teaching others what they had learned, and ensuring that the truth about human space was understood. The legends of fleets disappearing, explorers never returning, and the dangers of human territory were replaced with stories of wisdom, intelligence, and strategic mastery. For the aliens who had journeyed into human space, the experience had been life-changing. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown. They had observed the methods of a civilization that did not rely on violence, but on intelligence, foresight, and discipline. And they had returned to tell the truth, showing that humanity's power lay not in destruction, but in understanding, control, and patience. The galaxy would never be the same. The lessons of human space would influence decisions, strategy, and diplomacy for generations to come. And the alien crew, once fearful of the unknown, now carried a deep respect for a civilization that had proven that true strength is measured not by how much force one can wield, but by how wisely one can guide, protect, and observe. As the commander reflected on the journey, he understood one final truth. Humans were not just strong, they were extraordinary. They had mastered the art of survival, control, and intelligence in ways no one else had. And now, The galaxy knew the truth. Humanity did not destroy recklessly. Humanity protected, observed, and taught. Humanity endured, and the legends that once inspired fear now inspired awe. The alien fleet returned home, their mission complete. They had survived, learned, and brought back knowledge that would change everything. And the story of their journey would be told for generations, not as a tale of fear, but as a story of understanding, respect, and the extraordinary wisdom of humanity.